The ad on the babysitting app seemed almost too good to be true. $200 for one night, 6 hours total, 2 well-behaved children, ages 7 and 9. The Harrington family lived in Westbrook Heights, one of those neighborhoods where every lawn looked professionally maintained and every house had that catalog-perfect appearance. Sarah Chen had been babysitting since she was 15, and now at 22, she thought she had seen it all. Difficult kids, messy houses, parents who came home 3 hours late smelling like wine and apologies. But $200 for 6 hours? That was almost triple her normal rate. She almost didn't apply. Something about it felt off. Like when you see a designer purse at a thrift store and know immediately it must be fake. But her student loans weren't going to pay themselves, and her part-time job at the campus bookstore barely covered rent. So she filled out the application, uploaded her references, and tried not to get her hopes up. The response came within an hour. Mrs. Harrington's message was brief and professional. They would like to meet her before confirming. Could she come by the house tomorrow evening at 7? Sarah agreed immediately, already mentally spending that $200 on her overdue electric bill. The Harrington house stood at the end of Maple Drive, a 2-story colonial with dark blue shutters and a wraparound porch that belonged on a postcard. Sarah pulled her 10-year-old Honda into the circular driveway, suddenly very aware of how out of place her dented bumper looked next to the Mercedes and Tesla parked near the garage. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, smoothed down her hair, and grabbed her folder of references and certifications. The doorbell played a classical melody she didn't recognize. Through the frosted glass panels on either side of the door, she could see a figure approaching. The door opened to reveal a woman who looked like she had stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. Mrs. Harrington was probably in her late 30s, with shoulder-length blonde hair that caught the porch light and skin that suggested expensive skincare routines and regular spa visits. She wore dark jeans and a cream-colored sweater that probably cost more than Sarah's entire wardrobe. "Hello, you must be Sarah. Please, come in." The interior of the house matched the exterior's perfection. Hardwood floors gleamed under soft lighting. Curved staircase with wrought iron railings led to the second floor. Everything was decorated in shades of cream, gray, and navy blue. Not a single item out of place. No clutter, no mess, no signs that actual children lived here. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," Mrs. Harrington said, leading Sarah through the foyer into a spacious living room. "My husband should be down in just a moment. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee?" "Fine, thank you." Sarah sat on the edge of a pristine gray sofa, her folder balanced on her knees. Mrs. Harrington settled into an armchair across from her, crossing her legs with practiced elegance. Her smile was warm, but somehow didn't quite reach her eyes. "So you've been babysitting for 7 years?" "Yes, ma'am." "I started when I was 15. I have references from 6 families, all long-term. I'm also CPR certified, and I took an early childhood development course last semester." "Wonderful. And you're comfortable with all ages?" "Absolutely. I've worked with infants all the way up to preteens." Mrs. Harrington nodded, studying Sarah with an intensity that made her want to fidget. Before she could ask another question, footsteps sounded on the stairs. Mr. Harrington descended with the same polished appearance as his wife, tall fit, wearing a button-down shirt and khakis like he had just stepped out of a business casual catalog. His dark hair had just a touch of gray at the temples, the kind that made him look distinguished rather than old. "You must be Sarah," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, his smile practiced. "Thank you for coming by." Sarah shook his hand, noting the expensive watch on his wrist. Everything about these people screamed success, stability, perfection. So why did she feel a slight knot forming in her stomach? Mr. Harrington sat next to his wife, and for a moment they both simply looked at Sarah. The silence stretched just a beat too long. "Your references are impeccable," Mrs. Harrington finally said. "The Morrison family had especially wonderful things to say about you. They were great. I watched their kids for almost 3 years. And you're comfortable with overnight stays?" Sarah blinked. The ad hadn't mentioned overnight. "Oh, I see." There was some confusion. Mr. Harrington said quickly, "The booking would be from 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. 6 hours, as stated. We have a charity gala downtown. Very formal affair. Tends to run late. We should be back by 2 at the latest." "That would be fine," Sarah said, relaxing slightly. 2 a.m. was late, but manageable, and for $200, she could handle one late night. Excellent, Mrs. Harrington said. Let me tell you about our children. Emma is 9, very responsible, loves to read. Thomas is 7, a bit more energetic, but he follows the rules. They'll have already had dinner before we leave. Bedtime is 9 p.m. sharp. Emma's room is the second door on the right upstairs. Thomas's room is the third door on the left. Sarah jotted down notes in the small notebook she always brought to interviews. Bedtime 9 p.m., Emma second right, Thomas third left. They know not to leave their rooms after bedtime, Mr. Harrington added. That's very important. Once they're in bed, they stay in bed. No exceptions. Of course, Sarah said. Consistent bedtime routines are important. Mrs. Harrington leaned forward slightly. There's one more thing. It's a door at the end of the upstairs hallway. The one with the dark wood. That room is always kept locked. It's my husband's home office. Very sensitive client files, you understand? Under no circumstances should that door be opened. I understand completely, Sarah said. Privacy and security. Perfect, Mr. Harrington said, his smile returning. We'll need you this Saturday evening. We'll provide detailed emergency contacts, instructions for the security system, everything you need. Does that work for you? Saturday works great. You spend another 20 minutes going over logistics. Allergies? None. Dietary restrictions? None. Favorite activities? Books for Emma. Building blocks for Thomas. Emergency contacts including poison control and the children's pediatrician. The security system code, which would be written down and left on the kitchen counter. Everything seemed normal, organized, exactly what you would expect from parents like these. As Mrs. Harrington walked her to the door, she placed a hand on Sarah's arm. You seem like a very responsible young woman. I'm sure everything will go smoothly. I'll take good care of them, Sarah promised. I'm counting on it, Mrs. Harrington said, and something in her tone made Sarah glance back. But the woman's face remained pleasant, professional, giving nothing away. Sarah drove home with a strange feeling she couldn't quite name. Not fear exactly. It's more like the sensation of having missed something important in a conversation. A detail that slipped past while you were focused on something else. She turned up the radio and told herself she was being ridiculous. It was just a babysitting job. A well-paying babysitting job with what seemed like easy kids and reasonable parents. So why couldn't she shake the image of Mrs. Harrington's hand on her arm, the grip just a fraction too tight? Why did she keep thinking about that locked door at the end of the hallway and the way both parents had emphasized that it must never be opened? She told herself she was overthinking it. Rich people were weird about their stuff. Of course, they wouldn't want a stranger accessing sensitive work files. It made perfect sense. But as she pulled into her apartment complex parking lot, Sarah realized her hands had been gripping the steering wheel hard enough to make her knuckles ache. Saturday evening arrived with unexpected rain. Sarah pulled up to the Harrington house at 7:45, 15 minutes early. Her overnight bag packed with snacks, phone chargers, and a textbook she probably wouldn't have time to read. The house looked different in the rain, less like a magazine photo and more like something from a Gothic novel. The windows glowed with warm light, but the surrounding trees cast strange shadows across the lawn. Mrs. Harrington answered the door. In an elegant black dress that probably cost more than Sarah's tuition. Her hair was swept up, diamond earrings, catching the light. Behind her, Mr. Harrington adjusted his bow tie in the hallway mirror. Sarah, wonderful. You're early? Come in, come in. The house felt different at night. The soft lighting that had seemed welcoming before now created pockets of shadow in the corners. Sarah could hear children's voices upstairs, a girl's voice reading aloud and a younger boy's laughter. Let me show you where everything is, Mrs. Harrington said, leading her into the kitchen. It was spotless, all stainless steel and white marble. Emergency numbers here, she pointed to a list on the refrigerator. Security code here? She tapped a note card on the counter. The children have already eaten, but there are snacks in the pantry if they get hungry. Nothing with sugar after 8 p.m., understood. The landline is here if you need it. Cell service can be spotty in some parts of the house. Old wiring, you know how it is with these older homes. Sarah nodded, though the house didn't look particularly old. Everything seemed recently renovated, modern, new. Mr. Harrington appeared in the doorway, car keys in hand. We really should get going, dear. Traffic will be terrible. Yeah, of course, Mrs. Harrington said, but she didn't move immediately. Instead, she turned to Sarah, with that same intense gaze from their first meeting. You remember what I said about the locked room? Your husband's office? Not to be opened. Exactly, the children know this rule as well. They won't go near it. But just in case, I want to emphasize how important this is. That room must remain locked and undisturbed. I understand. Do you? Mrs. Harrington's voice had taken on a harder edge. Her husband cleared his throat softly and she seemed to catch herself. She smiled, but it looked forced. I'm sorry. I don't mean to sound harsh. It's just that some very important, very confidential client information is in there. My husband could lose his license if anything were compromised. I won't go near it, Sarah assured her. Just here for the kids. Mrs. Harrington held her gaze for another long moment, then nodded. Of course. Let's go meet them, shall we? They climbed the stairs, Sarah noting family photos lining the wall. The Harringtons at the beach, at a ski resort, at what looked like a European vacation. Emma and Thomas grinning in school photos. Everything looked perfect, normal, exactly what you would expect. But Sarah found herself studying the photos more closely. In every single one, the smiles looked just slightly off. Not fake exactly, but strained. Like someone had told them to smile and hold it just a second too long. Emma's room was exactly what you would expect for a 9-year-old girl. Pale purple walls, a neatly made bed with a floral comforter, shelves lined with books. Emma sat cross-legged on her bed, a thick hardcover book in her lap. She looked up when they entered, and Sarah was struck by how much she resembled her mother. Same blonde hair, same delicate features, but her eyes held something her mother's didn't. Wariness, maybe, or sadness. Emma, this is Sarah. She's going to be staying with you and Thomas tonight while Daddy and I go out. Hello, Emma, said quietly. Hi, Emma. What are you reading? The girl held up the book. A fantasy novel Sarah recognized, one about dragons and magic. Good choice. I loved that series when I was your age. Emma's expression didn't change. She simply nodded and looked back down at her book. Thomas's room was across the hall, decorated in shades of blue and green with model airplanes hanging from the ceiling. Thomas himself was building something with colored blocks on the floor, his dark hair falling across his forehead as he concentrated. He looked up when they entered, and unlike his sister, he smiled. But it was the kind of smile that didn't quite fit his face, like he was remembering to do it rather than actually feeling it. Hi, he said, are you Sarah? I am. That's an impressive tower you're building. It's a castle, he corrected. With a dungeon and everything? Thomas, be polite, Mrs. Harrington said, her voice sharp. It's fine, Sarah said quickly. I like castles. Maybe you can show me more about it later. Thomas nodded, already turning back to his blocks. Mrs. Harrington ushered Sarah out of the room, pulling the door partially closed behind them. They're good children, she said. They won't give you any trouble. Just remember, bedtime at 9. They stay in their rooms. No exceptions. Got it. Mr. Harrington called from downstairs. Darling, we really need to go. Coming? Mrs. Harrington called back. She started toward the stairs, then paused. She turned to face Sarah, her expression unreadable. If you hear anything unusual tonight, anything at all, I want you to call us immediately. Don't investigate. Don't try to handle it yourself. Just call. What kind of unusual things? Just anything out of the ordinary. A noise, movement, anything that seems off. This is a big house. Sometimes sounds carry in strange ways. I just want you to be careful. Before Sarah could respond, Mrs. Harrington hurried down the stairs. Sarah heard the murmur of voices, the sound of the front door opening and closing, and then the house fell into a silence that felt almost oppressive. She stood in the upstairs hallway, looking around. Emma's door to her right partially open. Thomas's door to her left, also partially open. And at the end of the hall, past 2 other closed doors, was the dark wooden door Mrs. Harrington had mentioned. Even from this distance, Sarah could see the heavy-duty lock below the handle, the kind that needed a key. Just a home office, she told herself. Nothing strange about that. But as she stood there, she could have sworn she heard something. A soft sound, almost too quiet to be sure it was real. It could have been the house settling, the rain against the windows, old pipes in the walls. Or it could have been crying. The first hour passed uneventfully. Sarah checked on both children, finding Emma still reading her book and Thomas building an increasingly elaborate castle structure. She went back downstairs, familiarized herself with the kitchen, found the snacks Mrs. Harrington had mentioned. Everything seemed normal. She was starting to relax. At 8:30, she called the kids down for a pre-bedtime snack. Emma came down first, moving quietly in fuzzy socks. She sat at the kitchen table without being asked, folding her hands in her lap like a little adult. Thomas bounded down a minute later, more energy than his sister, but still well-behaved. Sarah set out apple slices and peanut butter, glasses of milk. The children ate in silence. Not uncomfortable exactly, but not natural either. Most kids she babysat for chattered constantly, asking questions, telling stories, testing boundaries. These two ate their snacks like it was a scheduled task they needed to complete. "So," Sarah said, trying to break the silence, "do you guys do anything special on the weekends?" Emma shrugged. "Sometimes we go to the park. That sounds fun." "Do you have friends you play with?" "Sometimes," Thomas piped up. "We used to have play dates, but not anymore." "Thomas," Emma said sharply, her voice holding a warning. "What?" "We did. Remember when Aiden used to come over? And Sarah from school? But Mom said we couldn't have friends over anymore because Emma kicked him under the table." Thomas yelped and glared at his sister, but he stopped talking. "Because why?" Sarah asked gently. "'Cause our house is being renovated," Emma said quickly. "It's not safe for other kids. Right, Thomas?" Sarah watched them, that uneasy feeling from earlier returning. There was no sign of renovation anywhere in this house. No dust, no construction materials, no areas blocked off. Everything was pristine. "Well," she said, keeping her tone light, "maybe once the renovation is done, you can have friends over again." Neither child responded. They finished their snacks in silence. At 9 o'clock, Sarah sent them upstairs to brush their teeth and get ready for bed. She waited in the hallway as they went through their routines, struck by how efficient they were. No stalling, no begging for 5 more minutes, no bargaining. They moved through the motions like soldiers following orders. She tucked Thomas in first. His room was neat, his stuffed animals arranged on a shelf rather than scattered around. He climbed into bed and pulled the covers up to his chin, watching her with those 2 old eyes. "Good night, Thomas," Sarah said, reaching for the light switch. "Sarah? Yes? Are you going to stay the whole time?" "Of course I am. I'll be right downstairs if you need anything. Even if you hear things." The question made her pause. What kind of things? Thomas's eyes darted to his closed door, then back to her. "Just things. Sounds Mom and Dad said we should never leave our rooms at night, no matter what we hear. Even if it sounds like someone needs help." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What kind of sounds, Thomas?" He pulled his covers higher. "Never mind. I'm not supposed to talk about it. Thomas, if something is wrong." "Nothing's wrong," he said quickly. Too quickly. "I'm tired. Good night." Before she could press him further, he rolled over, facing the wall. Sarah stood there for a moment, debating whether to push the issue, but he was clearly done talking. She turned off the light and closed the door, leaving it open just a crack as Mrs. Harrington had instructed. Emma's room was next. The girl was already in bed, her book on the nightstand, her hands folded on top of the covers. She watched Sarah approach with that same wary expression. "All set?" Sarah asked. "Yes. Is there anything you need? Water? Extra blanket?" "No, thank you." Sarah sat on the edge of the bed. "Emma, your brother said something about hearing sounds at night. Is everything okay here?" Emma's expression didn't change, but her hands tightened on the covers. "We're not supposed to talk about that. If you or Thomas are scared of something, we're not scared. We just follow the rules. Mom and Dad have rules, and we follow them. That's what good children do." The way she said it, so flat and emotionless, made Sarah's skin crawl. May couldn't have been more than 9 years old, but she talked like someone much older, someone who had learned to suppress anything that might be considered a problem. "Okay," Sarah said softly, "but if you need anything at all, I'm right downstairs. You can come get me." "We won't leave our rooms," Emma said. "That's the rule." Sarah reached for the light switch. "Good night, Emma." "Sarah?" She turned back. "Yes. Be careful tonight." "What do you mean?" Emma pulled her covers up, mirroring her brother's earlier action. "Just be careful. And if you hear crying, don't go looking for where it's coming from." Before Sarah could respond, Emma rolled over, facing the wall just as Thomas had done. Conversation over. Lights out. End of discussion. Sarah stood in the darkened hallway, her heart beating faster than it should. Both children had mentioned sounds, had warned her about hearing things, had told her not to investigate. And the way they had shut down when pressed, the way they clearly knew more than they were saying. She was being ridiculous, she told herself. Kids heard things in old houses. Pipes, foundations settling, wind in the eaves. Mrs. Harrington had even warned her that sounds carried strangely in this house. There was nothing sinister about it. But as she walked down the stairs, Sarah found herself moving quietly, listening. The house was silent except for the rain against the windows and the soft hum of the heating system. She settled onto the living room couch with her textbook, but the words kept blurring together. She kept listening for something she couldn't name. 10 o'clock came and went. She checked on both children, found them sleeping peacefully. Nothing unusual, nothing wrong. 11 o'clock. She made herself a cup of tea in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone. Text from her roommate asking how the job was going. Sarah replied that everything was fine, because it was. Everything was completely fine. 11:30. She used the bathroom, washed her face, tried to shake off the lingering unease. She was working herself up over nothing. Rich people, weird kids, old house, that was all this was. And then, at 11:47, she heard it, crying. Soft at first, barely audible over the rain, but definitely crying. Child's crying, high-pitched and desperate. It seemed to be coming from upstairs. Sarah's first thought was that one of the kids had woken up and gotten scared. She hurried up the stairs, but when she checked Emma's room, the girl was fast asleep, her face peaceful. Thomas's room the same, both children sleeping soundly. But she could still hear it. Crying, definitely crying, coming from somewhere on this floor, crying. She stepped into the hallway, listening. The sound seemed to be coming from the far end, past the closed doors, past Emma and Thomas's rooms. From the direction of the locked door, Sarah's mouth went dry. That was impossible. There was no one in that room. It was locked. Mrs. Harrington had been very clear. It was just a home office. But the crying continued, rising and falling, punctuated by small gasping sounds like whoever was crying couldn't catch their breath. Sarah walked slowly down the hallway, her footsteps silent on the plush carpet. Her rational mind was screaming at her to stop, to call the Harringtons, to follow their instructions. But another part of her, the part that had taken all those childcare courses and had been babysitting for 7 years, couldn't ignore the sound of a child in distress. She reached the locked door. Crying was definitely coming from inside. She could hear it clearly now, could make out the hiccuping sobs, the desperate gasps. "Hello?" Sarah called softly. "Is someone in there?" The crying stopped instantly. Silence, so sudden and complete that Sarah wondered if she had imagined the whole thing. Then a small voice, barely above a whisper, "Help me." Sarah's hand moved to the doorknob before she could stop herself. It turned, but the door didn't budge, locked just as Mrs. Harrington had said. She could see the heavy-duty lock below the handle, the kind that needed a key. The kind that was meant to keep people out, or keep someone in. "Hello," Sarah said again, louder this time. "Who's in there?" "Please," the voice said. "Please help me. I've been here so long. Please." Sarah's mind was racing. This didn't make sense. The Harringtons had 2 children, both accounted for, both sleeping in their rooms. So who was behind this door? Why were they locked in? She pulled out her phone, her hands shaking. She should call the police or the Harringtons. Someone. But what would she say? That she heard crying from her room she was explicitly told not to go near? That she was snooping around despite clear instructions? But there was someone in there. Someone who needed help. "What's your name?" Sarah asked, pressing close to the door. A pause. Then Lily, how old are you? 10. I'm 10 years old. Please, you have to get me out, please. How did you get in there? They put me here, the voice said, breaking into fresh sobs. They took me and they put me here, and they said I have to stay until I am ready. But I don't want to stay. I want to go home. Please help me. Sarah's blood ran cold. They took me. They put me here. This wasn't a home office. This was a prison. She tried the door again, knowing it was useless. Looked around for something to break it down. But it was solid wood, heavy old. and the lock looked professional, not something she could pick with a bobby pin. "Lily, I'm going to get you out, okay? I'm going to call the police." "No," the voice said quickly. "No police. They said if anyone calls the police, bad things will happen. They have cameras. They're watching, they always know." Sarah looked up and down the hallway, suddenly aware that the house might have security cameras. She hadn't noticed any, but that didn't mean they weren't there. Hidden in smoke detectors, in picture frames, in air vents. "Okay," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice calm even though panic was clawing at her chest. "No police yet. But I need to find a key. Do you know where they keep it?" "She has it," Lily said. "The lady, she always has it. On a chain around her neck. Mrs. Harrington, of course, would have the key." Sarah backed away from the door, her mind spinning. She needed to think. She needed to figure out what to do. The Harringtons wouldn't be home until 2 a.m. That was over 2 hours away. Could she wait that long? Should she call them? Confront them? But if they really had locked a child in their house, if they really had taken her as Lily claimed, then calling them would only give them time to run, to cover their tracks. She needed to get that key. And she needed to get Lily out of that room before the Harringtons came home. Sarah went back downstairs, trying to look casual in case there were cameras watching. She sat on the couch, picked up her phone, and started researching. Locked doors, how to pick locks, how to break down doors. Most of the results were useless. The door was too solid, too well made. She would need tools she didn't have, strength she didn't possess, unless there was another way in. She pulled up a search for the house's blueprints. Old houses like this one often had unusual features. Servant staircases, dumbwaiters, crawl spaces. Maybe there was another way into that room that didn't require a key. But after 20 minutes of searching, she found nothing. The house was too new for historical records, too private for public blueprints. She was running out of time and options. That's when she heard footsteps upstairs, small footsteps moving carefully. A door creaking open. Sarah got up quickly, heading for the stairs. Emma stood at the top, her small frame silhouetted in the dim hallway light. "Emma, it's okay. Do you need something?" The girl didn't answer. She just stood there, watching Sarah with those two old eyes. "Emma." "You heard her, didn't you? Not a question?" A statement. Sarah climbed the stairs slowly. "Emma, who is in that room? You're not supposed to know about her, but I do know. And I need to help her. She's scared, Emma. She wants to go home." Emma's expression flickered with something. Pain, maybe. Or guilt. She can't go home. Her home isn't safe. That's why she's here. "What do you mean her home isn't safe?" Emma looked down at her feet. "Mom says some kids don't have good parents. Some kids need to be protected. That's what we do. We protect them." Sarah felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. "You mean there have been others? There are kids locked in that room?" Emma wouldn't meet her eyes. "We're not supposed to talk about it. But yes, different kids. They stay for a while, and then they go away, and new ones come. Mom says we're helping them. She says we're saving them. Where do they go? The ones who leave? I don't know. Mom and Dad take them somewhere. They don't tell us." Sarah's hands were shaking now. She thought of all those photos lining the stairway wall. The perfect family at the beach, at ski resorts, on vacation. How many of those trips had really been to dispose of children who had outlived their usefulness? How many kids had vanished because the Harringtons decided they were done playing savior? "Emma, we need to get Lily out of that room right now." "We can't. Mom has the key. And if we try to break the door, the alarm will go off. A special alarm that goes straight to Dad's phone. They'll know. Then we'll get the police here before they can do anything about it." Emma grabbed Sarah's arm, her grip surprisingly strong for such a small child. "You don't understand. They have lawyers, really good lawyers. And they'll say they were trying to help. They'll have papers that prove Lily's parents were bad people. They'll make it sound like they were doing a good thing. And then they'll make sure no one ever believes Lily or anyone else again." "How do you know all this?" "Because I heard them talking." She was here before Lily. She tried to run when they opened the door to bring her food. She made it all the way to the front yard before Dad caught her. A neighbor saw, called the police. But Mom and Dad had papers, documents, a whole story about how they were foster parents and Olivia was troubled, and they were just trying to help her. The police believed them. What happened to Olivia? Emma's eyes filled with tears. She went away. They took her on a trip, and she never came back. And then Lily came. Sarah felt sick. She thought about the $200, the amount that had seemed too good to be true. She thought about how quickly the Harringtons had responded to her application, how eager they had been to hire her despite having just met her. She thought about Mrs. Harrington's hand on her arm. That warning about hearing unusual things, about calling immediately if anything seemed off. They were testing her, seeing if she would follow instructions, seeing if she would ignore whatever she heard from that room. And if she did, if she proved herself to be compliant and quiet, what then? Would she become part of their operation? Another pair of hands to help with their twisted rescue mission? Or would she become a liability that needed to be eliminated? Emma, Sarah said urgently, does your brother know about this too? Thomas knows there are kids in the room sometimes, but he's younger. He doesn't understand like I do. How long has this been going on? I don't know. Since before I was born, I think. I heard Mom talking to Grandma once. She said Grandma used to do it too, that it was a family tradition. Helping children no one else would help. Sarah's mind reeled. A family tradition. Multiple generations of kidnapping children under the guise of saving them. The perfect cover, the perfect crime. Who would suspect a wealthy charitable family of being child traffickers, or worse, of being serial killers who convinced themselves they were performing mercy killings? We have to go, Sarah said. Right now, we're leaving. Can't leave Lily. I know, but I can't get her out without that key, and I can't get the key without confronting your parents. The best thing I can do right now is get you and Thomas somewhere safe and call the police from there. Real police, not the local ones who might be in their pocket. Emma looked torn. But if we leave, they'll hurt Lily. They'll know we told. They'll make her go away like Olivia. If we stay, we're all in danger. Emma, do you understand that? Your parents, they're not good people. What they're doing is very, very wrong. Even if they think they're helping, they're not. They're hurting children, and they need to be stopped. Tears streamed down Emma's face now. I know, I've always known. But they're my parents. And Thomas and I, we don't have anywhere else to go. You'll be safe, Sarah promised. I'll make sure you're safe. But we have to go right now. Emma wiped her eyes and nodded. I'll get Thomas. Make it quick. Grab only what you need. We'll leave in 5 minutes. Emma hurried to her brother's room while Sarah ran downstairs. She grabbed her bag, her keys, her phone. She looked around the perfect living room, with its perfect furniture and perfect decorations. How many children had sat on this couch? How many had eaten at that dining table? How many had walked through this house thinking they were safe, only to end up locked in that room at the end of the hall? She pulled up her phone and dialed 911. But before she could hit call, she heard it. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway, an engine shutting off, car doors opening. The Harringtons were home early. Sarah's blood turned to ice. She looked at the clock. 12:23. They weren't supposed to be back until 2. But here they were, and she was trapped. She heard Emma's voice upstairs, urgent whispers, footsteps. She ran to the base of the stairs.
Ow.
They're home, she hissed. Emma, Thomas, we need to hide. Right now. But it was too late. The front door was already opening. Mrs. Harrington stepped inside, still in her elegant black dress. But her face was different now. Gone was the polished professional smile. In its place was something cold, calculating, dangerous. Behind her, Mr. Harrington entered, and he wasn't alone. He was holding a girl by the arm, a teenager, maybe 14 or 15, with dark hair and terrified eyes. She was trying to pull away, but his grip was too strong. Oh, Sarah, Mrs. Harrington said softly. I had such high hopes for you. Sarah backed up toward the stairs, her phone clutched in her hand. The Harringtons moved deeper into the foyer, blocking the front door. The teenage girl stumbled, and Mr. Harrington jerked her roughly back to her feet. 8. We left the gala early, Mrs. Harrington continued, moving into the living room. Call it intuition. Mother's intuition, you might say? I just had a feeling we needed to come home, and look, I was right. Let her go, Sarah said, gesturing to the teenager. Whatever you think you're doing, whatever you tell yourself this is, you're wrong. You're hurting people. Mrs. Harrington tilted her head. Hurting people? Sarah, you don't understand. These children come from terrible situations. Abuse, neglect, drug-addicted parents. The system doesn't care about them. They fall through the cracks. We're giving them a chance. A chance at what? Being locked in a room? Being taken away to God knows where? Being saved? Mr. Harrington said firmly. His voice had lost all its warmth. He sounded like a man used to giving orders and having them followed. We provide shelter, food, safety. We rehabilitate them. And when they're ready, we place them with good families. Families who will actually take care of them. By kidnapping them? By rescuing them, Mrs. Harrington snapped. You naive little girl. You think the world is so simple? You think there's always a right answer? A clear path? But some children are born into hell, and someone has to pull them out. That's not your decision to make. Then whose is it? The courts that send them back to abusive parents? The foster system that loses track of them? The group homes where they're assaulted and ignored? Mrs. Harrington's voice rose with each question. Someone has to do something. We have the means. We have the resources. We can make a real difference. By traumatizing them. By locking them up like prisoners. It's temporary, Mr. Harrington said. Just until they adjust. Just until they learn to trust us. Some of them come from very difficult backgrounds. They need time to understand that we're here to help. Sarah felt Emma move up behind her on the stairs. She could hear Thomas starting to cry in his room. The teenage girl Mr. Harrington was holding had gone very still, her eyes darting between Sarah and the door. Emma, Sarah said without turning around, take Thomas to your room. Lock the door. Emma isn't going anywhere, Mrs. Harrington said coldly. She's our daughter. She stays with us. She's a child. You're using her as cover for your crimes. We're using our resources to help children in need. The fact that people like you cut and see that is exactly why we have to work in secret. Sarah looked at the teenage girl again, saw the bruises on her wrists where Mr. Harrington gripped her, saw the terror in her eyes. This wasn't rescue. This was abduction, imprisonment, trafficking. Whatever these people told themselves, whatever pretty words they wrapped around their actions, they were kidnappers. Possibly worse. Your daughter told me about Olivia, Sarah said. About how she tried to run and you made her disappear. Where is she now? Mrs. Harrington's expression flickered. Olivia was placed with a family in Montana. She's thriving there, from what I understand. You're lying. I'm really not. But the point is, Sarah, you've put us in a very difficult position. You were supposed to stay downstairs. We're supposed to ignore any sounds you heard. We're supposed to be like the other babysitters we've had over the years. Quiet, compliant, understanding the importance of discretion. How many? Sarah asked. How many babysitters have you brought in? How many have you tested like this? Enough to know the difference between someone who can be trusted and someone who can't. Mrs. Harrington took a step closer. You failed the test, Sarah. You went looking for something you shouldn't have found. You talked to Emma. You learned too much. And now we have a problem. The way she said problem made Sarah's skin crawl. She thought about making a run for it, grabbing Emma and Thomas, and trying to get past the Harringtons to the door. But Mr. Harrington was still holding the teenager, and he was bigger, stronger, blocking the only exit. Her phone was still in her hand. She could try to call 911 now, but they would stop her before the call connected, lest she could buy some time. What happens now? Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice steady. What do you do with people who fail your test? Mrs. Harrington smiled, but there was no warmth in it. That depends on the person. Some can be reasoned with. Some can be made to understand the importance of keeping certain things private. Others, she paused, others require more permanent solutions. You're talking about killing me. I'm talking about protecting our mission. We've helped over 30 children in the last decade, Sarah. 30 children who would have died or been destroyed by their circumstances. We have a network, resources, systems in place. One college student with good intentions isn't going to ruin years of careful work. I've already called the police, Sarah lied. They're on their way right now. Mr. Harrington laughed. No, you haven't. We monitor all phone signals in and out of this house. You haven't called anyone. Sarah's heart sank. Of course they monitored the phones. Of course they had thought of everything. These weren't amateurs. These were people who had been doing this for years, possibly decades, if what Emma said about their grandmother was true. The teenager suddenly moved, yanking hard against Mr. Harrington's grip. For a moment she almost got free, but he recovered quickly, wrapping his arm around her throat from behind. The girl gasped, clawing at his arm. "Stop!" Sarah shouted. "You're hurting her." "She'll be fine," Mr. Harrington said calmly. "It's just a little pressure to remind her who's in charge. Right, sweetie?" The girl went still, whimpering. Sarah felt rage building in her chest. These people were monsters, regardless of how they justified their actions. They were hurting children while claiming to save them. They were running a trafficking operation while hiding behind charity and good deeds. "Let me tell you what's going to happen," Mrs. Harrington said. "You're going to sit down on that couch, you're going to listen to what we have to say, and you're going to make a choice. You can join us, help us with our work, become part of something bigger than yourself. Or you can refuse, in which case we'll have to take other measures." "You mean kill me?" "I mean ensure your silence." "There are many ways to do that, Sarah. Death is only one option, and frankly, it's the messiest. We prefer people to simply disappear. New identity, new city, new life. We have the resources to make that happen. You'd be amazed what money can buy. And if I refuse that too, no, then you become a liability that needs to be eliminated. Simple as that." Sarah looked at Emma standing behind her on the stairs. The little girl was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. She looked at Thomas's closed door, heard his muffled sobs. She thought about Lily locked in that room at the end of the hall, crying for help that would never come. She thought about all the children the Harringtons claimed to have helped, wondering how many had actually been placed with good families and how many had simply vanished when they became inconvenient. "I need to think about it," Sarah said. "You have 2 minutes," Mr. Harrington said. He pushed the teenage girl toward his wife, who grabbed her arm with practiced efficiency. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a gun, just so we're all clear about the stakes here. Sarah's mouth went dry. She had never seen a real gun before, not up close like this. It looked smaller than she expected, but no less terrifying. "Mom," Emma's voice was small, frightened.
Mom.
"Please don't hurt her." "Shh, Emma," Mrs. Harrington said without looking at her daughter. "This is adult business." "But she didn't do anything wrong. She was just trying to help." "That's the problem, dear. Some people don't understand that help comes in many forms. Some people can't see the bigger picture." Sarah's mind raced. She needed a plan. Something. Anything. But what could she do against 2 adults? One with a gun in a house designed to trap people inside. The security system. Mrs. Harrington had said it could be spotty in some parts of the house. But that meant there were parts of the house where signals did work. If they could monitor phone signals, that meant there was some kind of equipment, some kind of system that could be disrupted or damaged. "Where's your bathroom?" Sarah asked suddenly. Mrs. Harrington frowned. "What?" "I need to use the bathroom. If I'm going to make a life-altering decision in the next 2 minutes, I'd rather not do it with a full bladder." The Harringtons exchanged glances. Mr. Harrington still held the gun, but he lowered it slightly. "This could be a trick." "It's not a trick," Sarah said. "I just need to pee. You can watch me walk there if you want. You can wait outside the door. But unless you want me to wet myself on your nice couch, I need to use the bathroom." "Now," Mrs. Harrington sighed. "Fine. The powder room is down the hall past the kitchen. I have 60 seconds. Sarah walked slowly through the living room, very aware of the gun pointed at her back. She could feel everyone's eyes on her. The teenage girl watched with desperate hope. Emma stood frozen on the stairs. Even Thomas had crept out of his room and was peeking around Emma's shoulder. The powder room was small, decorated in the same pristine style as the rest of the house. Sarah locked the door behind her, immediately pulling out her phone. Her hand shook so badly she almost dropped it. She opened the keypad and dialed 911. But just as Mr. Harrington had said, there was no signal. The phone showed full bars, but the call wouldn't connect. They really were blocking everything. 30 seconds, Mr. Harrington called from outside. Sarah looked around frantically. There had to be something she could use. A window, but it was too small and probably wired to the alarm. Cleaning supplies under the sink, but nothing that would work as a weapon. A hand towel, toilet paper, air freshener. Her eyes landed on the smoke detector in the corner of the ceiling. Smoke detectors set off alarms, loud alarms, like the kind neighbors might hear even through the rain. She grabbed the air freshener and held down the spray button, aiming it at the smoke detector. the room filled with artificial lavender scent. The can hissed, releasing its contents in a continuous stream. "Time's up," Mrs. Harrington called. "Just a second," Sarah called back, still spraying. The smoke detector started to beep. Then it began shrieking, a piercing alarm that filled the entire house. Sarah heard shouting from outside the bathroom. She unlocked the door and burst out, nearly colliding with Mr. Harrington. "What did you do?" he shouted over the alarm. "Nothing," Sarah shouted back. "Something's wrong with your smoke detector." And then she ran. It's not toward the front door where she knew they would expect her to go. Instead, she ran deeper into the house, toward the kitchen, toward what she hoped was the back door. Behind her, chaos erupted. The alarm was so loud it was disorienting. She heard Mrs. Harrington screaming something, heard Emma crying, heard the teenage girl shout. Sarah burst into the kitchen and saw the back door. Locked, of course, but this lock was simpler. A deadbolt she could actually turn. She fumbled with it as footsteps pounded behind her. The lock clicked open. She yanked the door and stumbled out into the rain. The backyard was dark, just shapes of trees and a fence she could barely make out. She ran toward it, her sneakers squelching in the muddy grass. Behind her, the back door slammed open. "Stop!" Mr. Harrington roared. "Stop right now, or I'll shoot." Sarah didn't stop. She hit the fence at full speed, grabbing the top and trying to pull herself up. The wood was wet and slippery. She got one leg over, then the other, and dropped down on the other side, landing hard in someone else's backyard. She ran again, heading for the streetlights she could see between houses. Behind her, she heard the fence rattling as Mr. Harrington climbed over. But he was older, slower, weighed down by his suit and dress shoes. Sarah reached the street just as lights started turning on in nearby houses. The alarm from the Harrington house was audible even from here, still shrieking into the night. Neighbors were coming out onto their porches, looking around in confusion. "Help!" Sarah screamed. "Someone call 911. Help!" A man in a bathrobe emerged from the house across the street. "What's going on?" "There are children in danger," Sarah gasped, pointing back toward the Harrington house. "They're holding kids prisoner. Please call the police." The man looked skeptical but pulled out his phone. Several other neighbors had gathered now, was drawn by the commotion and the still blaring alarm. Mr. Harrington appeared at the end of the street, breathing hard. When he saw the crowd, he stopped. Sarah saw him touch his jacket where the gun was hidden, saw him make a calculation. There were too many witnesses now, too many phones probably recording. He couldn't shoot her here, not with all these people watching. He turned and ran back toward his house. "The police," Sarah said urgently to the man with the phone. "Tell them there are children being held against their will. Tell them to send everyone." More neighbors emerged. Someone asked if Sarah was okay. Someone else offered her a jacket against the rain. She was soaking wet and shaking uncontrollably, but she barely noticed. It seemed to take forever, but was probably only 5 minutes before the first police car arrived, lights flashing in the darkness. Then another. Then another. Sarah ran to meet them, words tumbling out so fast she could barely get them all out. "Children locked in a room," she gasped. "A girl named Lily, Emma, and Thomas Harrington. A teenage girl they brought home tonight. The parents have a gun. They were going to kill me or make me disappear. Please, you have to help them." The officers looked at each other uncertainly. One of them spoke into his radio. Within minutes, more cars arrived. Someone wrapped a blanket around Sarah's shoulders. Someone else asked her to explain everything from the beginning. She told them about the babysitting job, the locked room, the crying, the confrontation. She told them about Emma's confession, about Olivia who had vanished, about the Harringtons' claim to have helped 30 children. She told them about the monitoring equipment, the blocked phone signals, the gun. The police surrounded the house. Sarah watched from behind one of the cars as officers approached with weapons drawn. The front door opened before they could knock. Mrs. Harrington stood there, looking calm and composed despite everything. "Officers," she said pleasantly, "I'm afraid there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Ma'am, we need you to step outside. We have reports of children being held against their will." "Reports from whom? Our babysitter?" Mrs. Harrington's laugh was light, practiced. "She's had a psychotic break, officers. We came home early from our event and found her acting erratically, frightening our children. We were about to call you ourselves. That's not true, Sarah shouted from behind the police car. She's lying. Ma'am, we need to search your home, one of the officers said. Do you have a warrant? We have probable cause based on reported child endangerment. Mrs. Harrington's pleasant expression didn't waver. Of course, please come in. You'll see that our children are perfectly safe, and this young woman is clearly disturbed. The officers entered the house. Sarah watched, her heart in her throat. What if they believed the Harringtons? What if the monitoring equipment was hidden too well? What if they opened that locked door and found it empty? Or found something that backed up the Harrington story? Minutes passed, more police arrived, an ambulance. Sarah saw EMTs heading into the house with stretchers. She saw lights turning on in every room. She saw neighbors gathering in clusters, whispering. And then she saw them bringing children out. First, Emma and Thomas, both wrapped in blankets, both crying. An officer carried Thomas while Emma walked, holding another officer's hand. They were taken to the ambulance. Then the teenage girl from earlier, also wrapped in a blanket, also crying. Then Lily. Sarah recognized her from her voice, though they had never met face to face. She was small, thin, with long dark hair and huge frightened eyes. She couldn't seem to walk on her own. 2 EMTs supported her between them, half carrying her to the ambulance. And then more children, a boy maybe 8 years old. Twin girls who looked about 12. Another teenager, a boy with a black eye and a split lip. It kept coming, more than Sarah had imagined. 7, 8, 9 children total, emerging from that house like ghosts. How? Sarah whispered to the officer standing near her. How did they hide that many? The house is bigger than it looks, the officer said grimly. There's a whole section in the basement. Multiple rooms, all locked from the outside. They had it set up like a facility. Sarah felt dizzy. A whole facility. Right here in this perfect neighborhood, in this perfect house. How many people had driven past this place, never knowing what was happening inside? She watched as Mr. and Mrs. Harrington were led out in handcuffs. Both were still composed, still calm. Mrs. Harrington even smiled at the officers as they put her in the back of a patrol car. A detective approached Sarah. His name tag read Detective Morrison. It's Chen. I need you to come down to the station and give a full statement. Of course. But the children, are they? They're being taken to the hospital for evaluation. Social services has been contacted. We'll make sure they're taken care of. What about Emma and Thomas? They'll be placed in protective custody while we sort this out. The detective's expression was sympathetic. I know you formed a connection with them, but they're part of this investigation too. We need to understand their role, what they knew, what they were forced to participate in. Emma tried to help, Sarah said. She told me what was happening. She was scared of her parents. We'll take that into account. But right now, they need to be somewhere safe, while we figure out the full extent of what's been going on here. Sarah nodded, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had kept her going was draining away, leaving her shaky and hollow. She spent the next 6 hours at the police station going over every detail of the night. What she had heard, what the children had said, what the Harringtons had told her. Other officers came and went, adding pieces to the puzzle. The Harringtons' house had been set up as what they called a rehabilitation center. They had been taking in children for over 15 years, always kids from troubled backgrounds or foster care situations. Sometimes they used legitimate channels, claiming to be foster parents. Sometimes they simply took children no one was looking for. The basement had been converted into a series of rooms, each with a bed, a small bathroom, and nothing else. No windows, no decorations, no comfort. The children were kept there for months at a time, sometimes longer. The Harringtons called it adjustment time, teaching the children to be grateful for food and shelter, breaking down their resistance, their individuality, their spirit. And when they were sufficiently broken, sufficiently compliant, the Harringtons would place them with families in their network. Families who paid significant amounts of money for children who had been trained to be perfect, obedient, quiet. It wasn't just kidnapping. It was trafficking. And the Harringtons had been doing it under the cover of charity work and foster care for years. The locked room Sarah had heard crying from was actually a punishment room, the detective explained, where they put children who resisted too much or tried to escape. Solitary confinement, sometimes for days at a time. Lily had been in there for 3 days when Sarah heard her. "What about Olivia?" Sarah asked. Emma said there was a girl before Lily who tried to escape. Detective Morrison's expression darkened. "We're looking into several missing children cases that might be connected. Olivia Parker disappeared from foster care in Ohio 2 years ago. You think she might have been one of theirs? What happened to her?" "We don't know yet. The Harringtons aren't talking. But we found evidence that suggests not all the children they took were successfully placed. Some of them just disappeared from the record entirely, meaning they're dead, meaning we don't know where they are. But yes, that's one possibility we're investigating." Sarah felt sick again. She thought about how close she had come to being one of those disappearances. How easily the Harringtons could have made her vanish if things had gone slightly differently. "You did the right thing," Detective Morrison said. "Running when you did, making noise, getting witnesses involved. That's what saved you and those kids." I didn't do enough," Sarah said. "I should have called the police immediately when I first heard crying. Should have." "You were in a dangerous situation with limited information," the detective interrupted. "You made the best choices you could with what you knew. Those children are alive because of you. Don't forget that." But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she had missed something, that there was more she should have done. She kept thinking about Emma's face when she talked about Olivia, the guilt in her eyes, the fear. Emma had been living with this knowledge for years, watching other children come and go, knowing what her parents were doing but unable to stop it. "What happens to Emma and Thomas now?" Sarah asked. "It's up to the courts and social services. They're victims too, in a lot of ways. They were born into this situation, raised to think it was normal. They'll need therapy, support, time to process what their parents did, but they'll be okay. Kids are resilient." Sarah hoped he was right. She hoped Emma and Thomas would get the help they needed, that they would find safety and normalcy, and a chance to just be kids. She hoped the same for Lily and all the others. As dawn broke, Sarah was finally allowed to leave. The detective gave her his card and told her she might need to testify when the case went to trial. She nodded, too tired to fully process what that meant. Her roommate picked her up, asking 100 questions that Sarah didn't have energy to answer. When they got back to their apartment, Sarah went straight to her room and collapsed on her bed, still wearing her damp clothes. She thought she wouldn't be able to sleep, that her mind would keep replaying the night's events. But exhaustion pulled her under almost immediately, dragging her into dreams where children cried from locked rooms and she couldn't find the keys. The story made national news within 48 hours. The Harringtons' charity work had made them locally famous, respected pillars of the community. The revelation that they had been running a child trafficking operation shocked everyone. Details emerged slowly. The scope of their operation was staggering. Over 15 years, they had taken at least 42 children. Some had been placed with families who paid between $50,000 and $100,000 per child. Others had simply disappeared. Police across multiple states were reopening missing children cases, looking for connections. Mrs. Harrington's mother was arrested a week later. It turned out Emma had been right. This had been a family operation going back to generations. The grandmother had started it in the 1980s, taking in runaways and troubled kids, breaking them down, selling them to the highest bidder. She had taught her daughter the business, and Mrs. Harrington had refined it, adding the cover of legitimate foster care and charity work. The network was enormous. Police identified 37 families who had purchased children through the Harringtons. Some claimed they had thought it was a legitimate adoption. Others clearly had known exactly what they were buying. Arrests were made across 8 states. Sarah found herself caught up in the media storm. News outlets wanted interviews. True crime podcasters reached out. She declined most of them, but eventually agreed to a single interview with a reporter from a major newspaper, hoping it might help other victims come forward. The hardest part was the guilt. She kept thinking about all the times she had seen missing children posters, and never really looked at them, never really thought about where those kids might be. They had been in houses like the Harringtons, hidden in plain sight in good neighborhoods with good families. She also couldn't stop thinking about the other babysitters Mrs. Harrington had mentioned. The ones who had taken the job and heard the crying and ignored it. How many had there been? How many people had come close to discovering the truth, but had chosen to follow the rules, to mind their own business, to collect their money and leave? Emma and Thomas were placed in foster care together. Sarah wasn't allowed to have contact with them during the investigation, but she followed their case through the detective. They were in therapy, struggling but making progress. Emma had started talking more, sharing details about other children she remembered, helping police piece together the full timeline. 3 months after that night, Sarah received a letter. It had been screened by investigators first, but they determined it was safe to forward to her. The envelope had Emma's name written on it in careful childish handwriting. Inside was a simple note. Dear Sarah, my therapist said I could write to you if I wanted. I wanted to say thank you. You saved us. You saved Lily and all the others. You believed me when I told you the truth. I'm sorry my parents tried to hurt you. I'm sorry you had to be scared. I'm sorry about a lot of things. My therapist says what my parents did wasn't my fault. She says I was a victim too. I'm trying to believe that. Some days are easier than others. Thomas and I are living with a nice foster family now. They have a dog named Biscuit. Thomas really likes him. I'm reading a lot. The same fantasy series you mentioned about the dragons. It's good. I hope you're okay. I hope you're not too scared anymore. Your friend, Emma. Sarah read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. She wrote back immediately, carefully, knowing her response would also be screened. She told Emma how proud she was of her bravery. She told her about other good books she might like. She told her that healing takes time, but it's possible. They corresponded twice more over the following months. Emma's letters got gradually longer, more detailed, more like a normal kid talking about normal things. She complained about homework. She talked about making a friend at school. She mentioned that Thomas had stopped having nightmares as often. The trial began 8 months after Sarah's night at the Harrington house. Both parents pled not guilty, their lawyers arguing that they had genuinely believed they were helping troubled children. The prosecution presented mountains of evidence. Testimonies from the rescued children, financial records showing the payments, communications with the network of families who had purchased kids. Sarah testified on the 3rd day. She sat in the witness box and told the story of that night, looking directly at Mrs. Harrington as she spoke. The woman showed no emotion, her face a perfect mask of calm. When Sarah described hearing Lily crying, when she talked about the locked door and the frightened voice begging for help, she saw several jury members wipe their eyes. Mr. Harrington stared at the table in front of him. Mrs. Harrington continued to look straight ahead, unmoved. Emma testified too, though from a remote location, to protect her identity. Sarah wasn't allowed in the courtroom for that part, but the detective told her later that Emma had been incredible. Strong, clear, detailed. She had described years of watching children come and go, of hearing them crying at night, of her parents explaining that it was all for the best, that they were saving these kids from worse fates. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The jury deliberated for less than a day. It's guilty on all counts. Kidnapping, child trafficking, child endangerment, conspiracy, and a dozen other charges. Mr. and Mrs. Harrington were both sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sarah watched the verdict on the news from her apartment. When the foreman read the word guilty for the final charge, she broke down sobbing. Her roommate held her while she cried, releasing months of tension and fear and guilt. It's over, her roommate said. You did it. They can't hurt anyone else. But it wasn't really over. Not for the children who had spent months or years in those basement rooms. Not for the families who had lost children and never knew where they went. Not for Emma and Thomas, who had to live with the knowledge of what their parents had done. The investigation continued for another year as police tracked down more members of the network, found more victims, connected more cases. 12 of the missing children were found alive, placed with families who thought they were getting legitimate adoptions. 3 were confirmed dead, their bodies found in locations the Harringtons finally revealed in exchange for slightly better prison conditions. 27 were still unaccounted for. Sarah graduated college, took a job as a social worker specializing in foster care. She couldn't save the children who were lost, but she could try to help the ones who were still out there, still vulnerable, still at risk. She reviewed every case that crossed her desk with intense scrutiny, looking for signs of trafficking, of abuse, of situations like the Harringtons. She stayed in touch with Emma through letters and eventually supervised video calls. The girl was 12 now, adjusting to her new life, still working through the trauma but making progress. Thomas was doing better too, though he struggled more with anger and trust issues. Their foster family was patient, committed to keeping them together, giving them the stability they had never had. Lily sent Sarah a letter on the anniversary of her rescue. Just a short note saying thank you, saying she was doing okay, saying she had nightmares sometimes, but they were getting less frequent. Sarah kept that letter in her desk drawer and read it whenever she felt discouraged about her work. 2 years after the trial, Sarah got a phone call from Detective Morrison. They found another one, he said. Another child who had been trafficked through the Harrington network. She was 20 now, had been living with a family in Oregon who purchased her when she was 7. She didn't even remember her real parents. Is she okay? Sarah asked. She's getting help. But she wants to meet you. She said she read about the case, about what you did. She wants to say thank you in person. Sarah agreed to meet her, had coffee at a quiet cafe, and the young woman, whose name was Rachel, told her story. How she had spent 10 years with a family who treated her well enough on the surface, but controlled every aspect of her life. How she had grown up thinking it was normal. How she had only recently started to understand that what happened to her wasn't okay. I didn't even know I was missing, Rachel said, stirring her coffee absently. My whole childhood, I thought I was exactly where I was supposed to be. It wasn't until I started college and met other people, heard their stories about their families, that I realized mine wasn't normal. That the isolation, the control, the lack of freedom, none of it was normal. Sarah listened, her heart aching for this young woman who had lost so much and didn't even know it. When I read about the case, Rachel continued, when I saw the Harringtons' photos, I remembered them. They came to my family's house once, when I was maybe 9, to check on me, I guess, to make sure I was working out. I remember Mrs. Harrington patting my head and telling my parents I was doing very well. She looked so nice, so normal. She looked like somebody's grandmother. Monsters rarely look like monsters, Sarah said quietly. That's what makes them so dangerous. They talked for another hour. Rachel was in therapy now, trying to reconnect with her biological family who had thought she was dead for over a decade. It was hard, she said. They were strangers to her. She felt guilty for not remembering them, for being glad she had been taken because otherwise she would have grown up in poverty and chaos. The therapist said those feelings were normal, that it would take time to process everything. But Rachel wasn't sure she would ever feel normal again. Before they parted, Rachel gave Sarah a hug. Thank you, she whispered, for being brave that night, for listening when you heard crying, for not just walking away. Sarah hugged her back, fighting tears. I just wish I could have done more. You did enough. You saved 9 kids that night, and you helped find dozens more. That's more than enough. But as Sarah drove home, she thought about the 27 children still missing, still out there somewhere or gone forever. She thought about all the other operations like the Harringtons that were still running, still taking children, still operating in plain sight. She thought about how many people saw signs and ignored them, heard crying and turned up the TV, noticed something wrong, and decided it wasn't their business. She couldn't save them all, no one could, but she could save some. She could listen when others might ignore. She could look when others might turn away. She could be brave when others might choose to be quiet. That night, she pulled out Emma's most recent letter and read it again. Emma was 13 now, thriving in school, making friends, learning to trust. She had written about joining the drama club, about getting the lead in the school play. The letter was full of normal teenage concerns and excitements, the kind of things any 13-year-old might write about. At the end, Emma had added a postscript. P.S. My therapist says I should tell you that sometimes I feel guilty for living a normal life now, while other kids are still out there suffering. She says that's normal too, that survivor's guilt is real and valid. But she also says the best thing I can do is keep living, keep healing, and maybe someday help others the way you helped me. I think I want to be a social worker like you when I grow up. Is that okay? Sarah smiled through her tears and pulled out a piece of paper to write her response. Of course it was okay. It was more than okay. It was hope. It was proof that even from the darkest situations, light could emerge. That broken things could heal. That children who had been treated as property could grow into strong, compassionate adults who would fight for others. The story of that November night would stay with Sarah forever. The fear, the desperate run through the rain, the sound of children crying behind locked doors. But it would also stay with Emma, with Thomas, with Lily, with Rachel, with all the others who had been saved or found or rescued. And maybe, Sarah thought as she wrote her letter to Emma, maybe that was the point. Not to forget, but to remember. To carry the weight of what happened, but use it to build something better. To hear the crying and refuse to walk away. To to see the locked doors and insist on opening them, because somewhere, right now, another child was crying behind another locked door. Another family was hiding terrible secrets behind a perfect facade. Another person would have to choose between minding their own business and doing the right thing. Sarah hoped they would choose bravery. She hoped they would choose to listen. She sealed the letter to Emma and set it aside to mail tomorrow. Then she opened her laptop and pulled up the files for her current cases. 23 children in the system, all needing someone to advocate for them, all needing someone to make sure they were safe and protected. She got to work. The crying from the locked room had been heard. The children had been saved. The monsters had been caught. But the work, the real work of healing and protecting and ensuring it never happened again, that work was just beginning. And Sarah was ready for it.